Hello and welcome back to the Canadian Money Roadmap podcast. I'm your host, Evan Neufeld. On today's episode, I am pleased to be joined by Jason Yee. Now, loyal listeners of the Canadian Money Roadmap recognize the name Jason Yee, but this is not the CPP specialist. This is Jason Yee, the co-founder and CEO of GrantMe. GrantMe is an education consulting service that helps top students attend top schools and, here's the kicker, graduate debt-free. So if you are a parent who has kids in high school, if you are a parent that has kids that are going into university, if you're a parent that doesn't want to pay for their kids' entire education, this episode is for you. Jason is an expert on this type of thing, and they have helped thousands of students graduate debt-free. So please enjoy this conversation with Jason Yee, the CEO and co-founder of GrantMe. All right, Jason Yee, thank you so much for joining me on the Canadian Money Roadmap podcast.
Thanks, Evan. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Jason, this is, we're recording this here like near-ish the end of August. This is kind of back to school time.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. And in my world here, I work with a number of people that are kind of in that planning to retirement or early retirement phase. And so their kids are in that going to university stage. So I'm getting a lot of calls and emails from clients that have our ESPs. Parents are trying to make sure that university is paid for, but sometimes paying for university can be a bit of a nightmare. Like I've seen students working multiple jobs, saving for years. Of course, RESPs come in. Student loans, I had those. Student lines of credit, my wife had some of those. All sorts of different things like this. But a huge source of funding is often overlooked. And believe it or not, it's free money. Like it's grants and scholarships. And that's where you come in, and why I wanted to bring you onto the podcast to talk to listeners about grants and scholarships and how a service like GrantMe might be able to help with that. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation about this.
Yes, me too. I got we have tons of experience helping students and parents primarily navigate this process and make smart financial decisions, not just like in the short term, but also in the long term, because obviously your education is probably your biggest investment other than your house. Especially for a student, like that's there for a big investment. Not too many students are buying houses before they go to school nowadays. So yeah, it's a big decision, and there's a ton of ways to sidestep some of the crazy costs. So I'm excited to get into that.
Perfect. Let's talk about some of the crazy costs, maybe like tuition rates. Are they going up higher than the typical inflation rate? Do you have any numbers on that? Like the numbers that I'm seeing are not the numbers that I was paying when I was going to school.
Yeah, I think the official data is like that. Yes, it is. And then also I just had a conversation. So Evan and I, we just met at a wedding in Penticton, and it was a lovely wedding. And one of my students, one of the GrantMe students, lives in Penticton, and I met with her for coffee because she was just an amazing success story. I'll share more about her later. And she got a $100,000 scholarship to U of T. I was like, okay, you're set, you're great. However, that only covers her tuition. That only covers her tuition. Now, granted, she's going into engineering, which is a very expensive competitive program, but I was shocked. And I deal with this every day. And there are some programs, we can talk about which ones they are. There are some programs like business and engineering usually that have much higher tuition than your typical program, and for good reason. And then, your let's say your arts or your general studies, those will be a little less expensive, but they've still gone up in price, but not as much as I think some of these other programs have.
Yeah, it is crazy how much money education can cost. And here in Canada, I know our pricing model is a little bit different than in the US as well. Like um, you're the expert on this, but the average tuition for someone who's not on scholarship in the US can be quite a bit higher. But for us in Canada, at least, we have a little bit of cost savings compared to our American counterparts. But nonetheless, it's a big expense. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of parents go into debt themselves to uh, have their kids avoid going into debt to pay for school. Do you see that kind of thing on your end when you talk to parents, or do you hear stories from them?
We definitely do, but you bring up a really good point, which I'd love to jump into, which is one of the best ways to save money on education is to understand the difference between the Canadian and the US system for a Canadian. One of the best ways to save money on your education is go to school in Canada, at least your undergrad. Why do I say this? Well, we have amazing schools in Canada. We have some of the top ranked schools in the world. And the really nice thing is that it's subsidized. It's subsidized by the government. So if you go to UBC or U of T or Queens or really any accredited school, you're paying roughly 25% the cost of what an international student pays. So just for example, U of T, they would be let's say for engineering, it's like 17 grand for our student there that we had. For an international student, it's going to be minimum $50,000. And that is kind of the same when you go to the US, right? So if you're going to the US, you're paying probably 50K USD. So that's what, 65, 70. And so that's the first thing.
That's
Now,
per year, not for the
per
entire.
year, sorry, yes,
Yeah,
exactly, per
that's nuts.
year. But the other reason that you want to consider going or staying in Canada, again, at least for your undergrad, is because the US system is not like the Canadian system. It's actually much more competitive than the Canadian system. And in Canada, you could, if you have good grades and you have decent extracurriculars, you could consider applying to the US to Canada in grade 12. You kind of just like wake up one day in September and apply, and you have a decent shot, so long as you have good grades and you have good extracurriculars and you put together a good profile. If you do that to the States, to a top school, no chance. Like, no chance. You need to be thinking about the States in grade 9. One thing that happens is a lot of parents and students, they come to us and they say, oh, I'd like to go to like Stanford for fun. And we say, okay, first off, you don't know the cost. And second, you're not prepared. You needed to be preparing this in grade 9, or as Americans say, the ninth grade. So that is a huge unlock. And then the third reason that you'd want to consider a Canadian school is because the scholarships, grants and student loans you can still use in the States, but scholarships and bursaries for Canadian students studying at Canadian schools are way higher. The opportunities are way, 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 way higher. So, I mean, if you're wanting to go to MIT or any of those schools, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, and you have the means, have at it. But if you're not prepped and you don't have an extra $250,000 sitting around, then, and I literally mean an extra $250,000, then the Canadian schools are a way better option for those reasons.
Wow. Okay. This is very enlightening. It's crazy how different it can be. And the person that wakes up in grade 12 and says, I'm just going to go to my local school. You're looking at them here. So this is outside of my area of expertise. So I'm really glad to have you on here to talk about some of these kind of things. So let's talk about those grants and scholarships. You said there's tons available for Canadians. Let's take maybe we can go two sides of this. What kind of money is out there and what kind of money is left out there? Like, is this an actual opportunity, or does it get gobbled up by all the best people right away?
A bit of both. I think that, so let's talk about a couple of different opportunities. What I like to separate things into is families that are below, and the number will have gone up now. So I think below around $70,000 of family household income. Now, this is an average number because it depends on the number of dependents that you have. So if you have more dependents, that number is higher. If you have less dependents, that number is around $60,000 or $70,000 of household annual income. If you're at that number or below, you will fall into a threshold of financial need where you basically should be able to graduate debt-free from a good, if not a great university in Canada. And I'll tell you exactly how to do that. But the other part of it is the above that threshold where some of the government funding dries up, and then you have to be focused more on merit-based awards, and to an extent, bursaries. So just quickly, I'll back up, which is that there's three types of financial aid or funding for students. There is grants, there are bursaries, and then there are scholarships. So, and each of those have a subsection too, primarily scholarships. So grants are non-repayable funds that the government gives you. Now, the trick with these is that you have to fill out the application the right way. Now, I don't mean lying on your application. I mean literally knowing what box to check, because sometimes there's some tricky wording, which is like, you have to apply for the loan and you might even receive the loan, but then as a part of it, you will get the grant, which is non-repayable. And then you can do whatever you want with the loan for a period of years because there's no interest on it. You can invest it, you can put it in a GIC, and then you just pay it back the day that you need to. But that grant portion is a non-repayable sum of money. The second is a bursary, which can sometimes be used interchangeably with scholarships, but typically what a bursary is schools have bursary programs. And if I am a student who has sub that $60,000, $70,000 a year in family household income, and I get assessed for a need, and then the grant and student loan that I was given, and let's say it was $15,000, and I was only given $10,000 of that need. That additional $5,000, I can often, not always, but I can often go to my school, depending on the school, go to their financial aid office and say, here was my unmet financial need. And it's actually a number that you'll get from the student loan and the grant application that you have. You'll give that to them, and then they will often give you a bursary. Again, not always, but often. And that is what a bursary typically is. Then scholarships, there's a wide range of scholarships. You have some funny ones, like some contests. So you have things like Canada's Luckiest Student. I think CIBC has like a full ride one, and it's literally a contest. Like you click a button, you give your email, that email gets you marketing messages, but you get entered, and they are legit. They do happen, but there's really nothing to it. You just click a button and
it's luck of the draw.
Yeah, exactly. But then you also have two other categories of scholarships. You have merit-based scholarships, and the ones that every family should know of, but they're also Canada's most competitive, are the Loran Scholars Scholarship, which is a $100,000 award, the TD Community Leader Scholarship, which is a $70,000 award, and the Schulich, which is $100 up to $120,000 award for STEM students. And I would add the fourth being like the Terry Fox, which I think is about $40,000 or 36 or something like that. So those are the big awards in Canada. And if you have a great profile, you should be applying to those, because if you win them, they're life-changing sums of money for a student. And then there are entrance scholarships. So these are specifically tied to a university, and they're basically a subsidy against your tuition. And there's some really big ones. There's some really small ones. We can get into that. But it's basically a subsidy on your tuition. And then the last one are and this is really where the hardworking student can go and go to work, which is your more local community-based scholarships. Typically a Rotary Club or Kiwanis, they will have an amount, and they're like all over Canada. And if you go and apply, you're almost always getting small amounts. It might be $500, it might be $1,000, but often it repeats. And so these are like little things that can really add up. And these are the things that kind of understanding the whole array of all of this is how we help students to graduate debt-free.
That's really cool. So it's something that I kind of hear from people once in a while, or maybe I'm observing more than I'm hearing it from them as specific feedback, is that, okay, well, my parents have saved a lot for my education. I've got lots of money in RESPs. Why would I bother applying for scholarships and grants and that kind of thing? Because I feel like there's kind of this misconception that a lot of these financial awards or even RESPs need to go directly to the school to pay for tuition only. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it perhaps is, like some of those entrance ones, I suspect. Like I got one from the University of Saskatchewan, and it's a few $1,000 off, and I didn't even apply for it. It's just like your marks are high enough, perfect. We'll just lop off a few grand from your tuition in the first year. Um, Obviously, I can't take that money back and go put it as a down payment on a car, but there is a little bit more flexibility with some of these other things, right? Would that be a fair assumption, or am I misunderstanding how some of these work?
It depends. So, grants and student loans, you can use however you want. As long the way that they verify that is that you're registered at an accredited university. So you can't go to like the University of Jason Yee and that I made up yesterday and use your money for that, right? That doesn't work.
Right.
But if you're going to any registered university, the student loans and grants, you can do whatever you want with that money. Now, ideally, you do something smart with that money, something that I'm sure you would advise, like a GIC, or just put it in a high interest savings account, or what have you, or truly pay your tuition. But you could hypothetically go buy new sneakers or whatever. You could do that, and I don't think either of us would recommend that. So that is how that works. Bursaries, it depends thing. Some schools will write you a check because each school's financial aid department is very different. And so it might just literally go against your tuition, kind of like you were saying, or they might write you a check. That could happen. And then scholarships. So the entrance scholarships we talked about, that's what you would have received. Some big ones like Queen's Chancellor, TD National Scholars, Calgary's, I think it's President's Award. UBC has a presidential award. All of these entrance scholarships are just subsidies against your tuition, and it's applicable to that school. So it's kind of like, if you want to think about it this way, if you go to Best Buy and you see like $100 off a TV, that's kind of what it is. And schools do their best to recognize promising students and then attract them with those offers, right? So the student I met in Penticton I was talking about, her name's Kira, and you can look up her student success story on our website. She is an amazing student, like amazing. So U of T is like super excited to have her as a student, but she was heavily recruited by other schools as well because she's absolutely brilliant. We can talk about that. And then TD, Loren, Terry Fox is another big one in the Lower Mainland called BD. They look for a bit of proof that you have both the kind of the requirements and that you're going to the school. So you might need to submit to them your transcript, something like that. Schulich is an interesting one. That's the STEM one that I was talking about. $100,000 award. It's tied to a specific school, and each school has a certain number of seats, and they get to award that to a certain number of students every year, and that is tied to that school. So you don't win whereas the TD, you win that, and then you can go anywhere. Schulich is like you win the Schulich for a specific school, and that's how that works. And then Loran, I think it's the only restriction on it, is that you are not at a school nearby to your parents. They want to give you the $100,000 for you to move away from home. So that is a stipulation. But the community ones and the smaller ones, you can typically use that for whatever you like. And of course, recommending that you do spend it on your education. But if you were going to use it for spending money or for rent or whatever, you're welcome to do that. But typically, that is how all of that works. And then the RESPs will be able to be used for living expenses. That's like typically what we see happen.
Very cool. Yeah. So I think of the person who, maybe wants to go into a cheaper program, and they don't need 100 grand award. And so maybe they bypass it or whatever. It's like, no. Let's apply for these things. Let's get some money here. And then perhaps in certain cases, you can use it to maybe not stay in a 4-person dorm or something like that. You can kind of afford to pay for other things to make your university experience a little bit nicer.
Yeah, and in Kira's example, and we've had this, and she's just top of mind because I just met with her, but we've had many, many, many of these students. They get in these like they have these like good problems to have, which is that she was offered $120,000 because she won the Schulich to U of A, and like she was going to literally get paid to go to school. She'd end up with money in the bank, but she ultimately chose to go to U of T. And even though the scholarship amount is similar, she's now going to have to fork over more money because the scholarship amount is similar, but the cost of tuition and living there is much higher. So those are the types of like good situations that we hope students end up in. They're going, oh no, do I go to this school and have no debt, or do I have to work a little bit to go to this school? And those like the good types of situations that we want students in.
Cool. Okay, so if a parent is seeing this and they say, okay, I want my kid to graduate debt free. I want to be debt free on their behalf and get them through school, whatever
Yeah.
kind of arrangement the parent has come up with for the child. Maybe they're hearing this for the first time. And they say, okay, the Schulich and the Loren and all these different names. And I'm sure there are dozens and dozens and dozens of others, depending on one's circumstance. This sounds maybe a little bit overwhelming. So maybe is this where GrantMe comes in? Yeah, I'm setting you up here for a little bit of a softball, but like if somebody is now thinking, okay, maybe I haven't thoroughly considered all of the different options and even all of the different schools that are available, maybe I could, if I was, I'm here in Saskatoon, maybe I don't want to go to the U of S because I qualified for some funding in Calgary or something like that. Where does one even start with the applying for different schools and knowing which programs are available and then the funding options on the back end?
Well, let's maybe start with the you just had a child, they're born, and start contributing to the RASP. That would be like the starting point, because the government matches that, and it matches it up to a certain amount, and there's a grant portion of that as well. So that's probably like your first part, and I'm sure you've talked about that lots. So that would be like a starting point, and then the next would be the big thing that we specialize in, and to be clear, your kid needs to have great grades if you're wanting to win scholarships to graduate with a full ride, or like very minimal debt, or hopefully none, but to win a considerable amount of scholarships, grades do need to be high. They do matter. Sometimes you hear people say, oh, grades don't matter, and it's true that there are like a higher weight nowadays placed on extracurriculars, but grades still matter. You can't get away without that. But then this is the trick. This is the thing that is now the thing. And grade 9 is around the time to start thinking about it. So parents want to be thinking about it ahead of time. And it's not doing this for the sake of just winning a scholarship or graduating debt free. You have to do this authentically. You have to do something that matters to you, and that also like gives back to the community in a way that you're passionate about, because you need to then be able to write about it and then also interview about it well. So these scholarship committees in schools, they will detect lack of congruency. If a kid says, oh yeah, I love horses, but they hate horses, then it's going to show up in the interview.
Allergic to horses, yeah. I'm actually
right. And what's funny is like that kind of thing. People try to do it all the time. It just doesn't work. So thinking about how a student is going to give back to their community in an authentic way, starting in grade 9, and the key way we differentiate that type of activity is we have what's called member activity, leadership activity, and initiator. And these 3 categories really separate people on their applications. And we learned this after seeing thousands of essays and thousands of students, and understanding which ones were getting the biggest awards and which ones were getting into the top programs and which ones weren't. And that distinction is, a lot of people, they think, oh yeah, if I just like do a bake sale in grade 12, like I got some volunteer experience and I'm good. Or they're just part of student council. And I absolutely don't minimize that. That takes a lot of work. But what really has people stand out is something called an initiative or a passion project. These are things that are truly aligned with their passion and giving back to their community. And yes, the top recipients, they start this work in grade 9. Now, they don't have to necessarily build a crazy, like a school in Africa or something like that. That's nice if you can do that. But usually it's really just about giving back in your community. And if you check those boxes, you have great grades, then it's about preparing early, because grade 12 is such a, it goes by in a flash. There's a lot going on extracurricular wise. There is, you have all the social activities that have to do with that. And so what we encourage students and parents to do is be prepared in advance. Look ahead to what scholarships and everything is coming up, and then prepare for that in advance before grade 12 even starts. That way, when you get to grade 12, you just hand in your stuff, or you tweak it and then hand in your stuff, and then you can focus on your grades, which are so important for your applications, right? So that would be like the high flying strategy if you're gonna fully optimize it. But I also want to pause there because I've been just talking for a long time. But I also want to touch on, see if there's any questions. But then I want to touch on, if you're a lower income family, how you graduate debt free if you cannot do that. So is there anything I should dive in on deeper there before I go to that?
No, this is perfect. That was one of my next things that I was going to ask about. And then I've got another thing that I'm hopefully getting your personal experience on in regards to like sports scholarships and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well then, okay, so if you're lower income, so remember, like I said, that threshold is around $70,000 if you were to have one dependent, and then it starts to go up if you have multiple dependents. What that determines is your status of financial need. And if you have financial need, when you go to apply for a student loan, which you should do, you should absolutely apply for a student loan. Doesn't mean you need to take it and then spend it and then go wildly into debt. What it does mean is you could take it, you can put it in a GIC or a high interest savings account, and you can earn interest on it with that loan portion. But what that does is it unlocks the student grant funding for you, and that will create that unmet need that I talked about earlier. So what you'll then do, and we have a blog on this, by the way, like with a full detailed, like step-by-step how you do this. And then we offer to help families that have that fall into this lower income bracket. We offer to help them for free. You just send us an email and we just make sure that everything's set up correctly. That's how we help with that. And so once you have you've applied to the student loan, you receive the grant for the full-time student grant, then you take that unmet need to your financial aid office. That's where you'll typically get the bursary. And if you're able to live at home during this time, that's and go to a Canadian school, of course, that amount should cover your tuition and books, and you will be able to graduate debt free. Yes, you might need to live at home. No, you can't go buy a Porsche while you're doing it. But yes, you can absolutely graduate debt free if you follow that strategy. Then the icing on the cake is the different scholarships and all those different things. But so for lower income families that want to graduate debt free, that is the way that you do it.
Very cool. Okay, so now, talking about income levels. If your income is above that threshold, it's probably about grades, extracurriculars. For lower income folks, following processes, applying for the right student loans, talking to the financial aid office at the school, all those kind of things. And then would you say sports scholarships? I don't know if scholarship is the right language there. Now that I'm learning all the differences between funding.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that separate or a subset of each of those income levels? So I played basketball, assume I was actually really good at basketball, and I was on the radar of the U of S Huskies basketball team. You don't need to speak to the school specifically, but say I was great at basketball, but my parents made tons of money and I had terrible grades or something like that. Is that still an option, or like maybe bring sports into the equation here? Because when people think of full ride scholarships, they often think of superstar athletes and things like that.
Yeah, that is a fun topic and one that is near and dear to me. My wife, and I should not steal any thunder from Madison, by the way, because she's the actual founder of GrantMe. She started GrantMe.
I was gonna say,
Um,
what are we even doing here, man? She should be in the
she should be the one because she's the one that her story was, she had a little bit of money saved up, but she got into her third year and all of a sudden was like, I'm running out of money. And so she figured out all these strategies, the grants, the bursaries, the scholarships, and she was able to apply them. She ended up in her last 2 years winning over $50,000 of grants, awards, and bursaries. She graduated with money in the bank, and how GrantMe started was she began advising her classmates on how to apply to grants properly because people just weren't doing it. So that's how we started. And yeah, so she was on a soccer scholarship. And so I think what's important to know about athletic scholarships is that it's very rare. It's almost as rare as making the NHL or the NFL or the ML, whatever, like whatever top sports league. It's almost that rare that you get a full ride scholarship. So I hate to burst parents' bubbles. If you're investing in your kids' sports, I have we talked about, I have a hockey coaching channel. That's one of my other businesses as well. And I always caution parents. I say, look, if you have the means to invest in these experiences in sport for your kids, awesome. But do not justify it for yourself as, oh, maybe they'll get a scholarship. It's not a good investment. Financially, it's not going to pay off. If you want to justify it in other ways, like character building, having them develop skills, overcoming resilience, teamwork, those are invaluable skills, not quantifiable, of course, but super, super valuable. And you should make the justification that way. And I always like to tell parents to be very clear. That is why you're doing it. The financial payoff is probably not there because the way that some students get awards is you have really, really top. You need to have two things. You got to be a top end athlete that is like maybe going to go pro, like maybe, like you have to be probably that good. And then whatever program you're playing for needs to have a ton of money, which in Canadian sports is usually not the case. So you might get a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year scholarship for athletics. If you're, I think, fortunate, I think that's probably the average, but that comes nowhere near to tackling the full cost of it. It's nice, but it's not like a true like financial payoff, and it probably doesn't equal out to the amount of money that parents invest earlier in sports to get their kids there. So I always just say to people that are considering athletics is you should really be pursuing the strategy I talked about earlier, which is with volunteering, extracurriculars, initiatives, keeping your grades high, because you can pursue both strategies in parallel. You can win all the academic and extracurricular based scholarships and also get the athletic scholarships. And then that $3,000 or $4,000 that you get for a year from an athletic scholarship doesn't compound, but is additive to the other side. So that's how I would think about athletic scholarships. And don't even get me started on the States, because that is again, if you have the means, and that is a choice you want to make, then have at it. But the way scholarships work in the States, especially the Ivy Leagues, is it's financial need based. And because house prices in Canada are often higher than in the States, and your house price is an asset that gets factored into the equation, the financial need that you have ends up being lower. So you often end up paying a lot more dough. So that's, if you have the means and that's important to you, absolutely. But if you're making decisions on a financial basis, there are better choices, and Canada is a great place to be.
Awesome. This is invaluable advice here. I never knew any of this stuff. This is awesome. So we're talking a lot about parents and kids. How often do you see kids taking the initiative on this versus parents? And what parents see the value of it? but they're worried about taking on too much of this burden. It's like, I don't have the energy to like push it too much into this. So like, how do people find that balance of, encouraging kids to get into extracurriculars, apply for these certain things, but without taking on yet another parenting burden of all these additional applications? Or maybe is that just part of it? Like if you want to do it, you got to put in the effort.
Yeah, it's about 50-50. Obviously, we just have some amazing students who just take initiative. And like, honestly, like I thought I was pretty active as like a student. I had good grades, I had good extracurriculars. And then I talked to some of our students, and they just blow me away. And they would blow me out of the water, like when I was that age too. Like they're wise beyond their years. They are when you hear the media being like, "Oh yeah, we're screwed because the next generation is lazy and they don't care about the world and blah blah blah." I'm like, "Yeah, right. You have not met our students." So we have some amazing, amazing students that take initiative or they work with their parents. And then we have amazing parents who see this opportunity as well and support their kids. So it's about 50-50. How do you not shoulder the burden? I don't know. I think that parents are already, you know, pretty involved at that age and making sure that that their kids are applying to the schools, doing it on time. I know my mom was at that age. I was a fairly mature and independent student, but my mom was still kind of like, "Hey, like now is the time." And I think it's the same thing. And I mean, I'm not going to go into parenting styles or anything because that's well out of my realm of expertise. But I mean, parents can we should probably approach it much like a child's involvement in any activity. So if you're playing sports or you're a musician or in dance or art, and you're encouraging the student to like show up on time, do the work, be a good contributor, be a good teammate, and that's how you parent. It would be the same thing with this. And ideally, this is something that fits in a student's life well. And ideally, it's something that you do, like I said, or at least begin. You don't have to go crazy on it in grade 9 or grade 10, but at least you've begun it, because that way you don't have to like pile it on in grade 12 and panic. So if you're starting early and you're thinking about it and you're just on top of it and you're treating it like another activity, like, "Oh yeah, we're starting violin or we're starting pottery or we're starting soccer," think about it the same way. And now that I've given you the strategy, and we have tons of resources on our website that guide you through that. And of course, if you want to join our program, we do that as well. But if you know the strategy and you just keep on it, then it doesn't have to pile up and be super hectic in grade 12.
Okay, so let me let's maybe wrap up the conversation here. I've already taken way too much of your time, but let's hear specifically about GrantMe. You don't have to be the sales guy. I'd like to hear about it. If someone wants to go through your program and to make their life easier on applying to the top school and helping with funding to do so, what is the process to work with GrantMe?
The process would be you go to grantme.ca. We have an assessment. We have a few assessments actually that give you an idea of like where you're at relative to your goals in terms of either your scholarship eligibility or your eligibility to get into the top programs. And if you are a good fit to work with us, there's the opportunity to book a call with us. And then from there, there's a consultation to make sure that you and your child are a fit and willing to do the work. And from that point, if you want to join, we have an excellent guarantee, and we can then get to work. And then people can also just reach out to me directly at jason@grantme.ca if they have any questions. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And also set you up with someone on our team if you'd like to chat about getting started. So both of those ways are ways that you can get a hold of us. And then also like reach out to anyone on our team. We're all super friendly. We like to help. And if you just go to our website or LinkedIn, you can find us there and send us a note, and everyone will be happy to help. So and what's cool too about GrantMe is that some of our employees, not all of our employees, but a good chunk of our employees are former students of the program. And it's like a really special thing because they were in the students' shoes and now they are, we hired them. We often hire them in internships, and then they just grow into roles in the company. So they're so passionate about it. They really want to help. And it's a really lovely place to work, and it's super fun to help students, especially when you have conversations like I did up in Penticton with Kira. It's super rewarding to see students like unlocked in their lives.
So maybe I'm going to state the or maybe say the unsaid here, but GrantMe is not just access to a spreadsheet list of scholarships that are available and links to apply to UBC or U of T. It is an actual like a personalized coaching program. Would that be a better way to describe it?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how we think about it. So our vision is to develop the next generation of leaders. And I'm sure it's something you talk about, but I think it's something like there's 900,000 baby boomers are retiring in Canada every year, which is, I think that number is correct. So it's a big gap, right? Because our baby boomers are the leaders of our organizations, and they're the heads of hospitals and our government and our biggest companies and our schools. And so that is a lot of experience leaving the workforce. And I don't know if people are necessarily talking about that. And we see it as our vision, our mission to help the next generation of leaders, the Kiras, the Ravjods, the Haleys, and you'll see all these folks on our student success pages, help them navigate the university application process. We try to take away all the stress, all the confusion, so they can just focus on what they're best at, which is their academics and giving back and making an impact. And so we want to enhance that. We want to develop them. We want them to do that faster. And we believe it's necessary to have the world's keep on turning, because I believe that need is there. And we believe in that strongly, that it isn't just because we've seen it before. If you just want a list of scholarships, we'll give you a list of scholarships and good luck to you. That's not how you graduate debt free. You need a strategy. It's like everything, right? With personal finance, you need a strategy. It has to integrate into your life. You have to have the right mindset, and you got to work at it consistently. And no, it's no magic bullet, right? You got to do the work, and that's exactly what we aim to coach at GrantMe.
Yeah, that's the problem that I see is that, a lot of people that are willing to do the work don't know which work to do. This is where financial planning largely comes in. We're the guides. You still got to get in the car and and drive to the destination kind of thing. But in your case, exactly the same thing. And it's
Yeah,
not
like
a magic bullet by any means, but you need to know where to focus your efforts.
yeah, your value as a financial planner is that you get to see hundreds or thousands of people. You get to see their success, you get to see their failure, and then you can iterate it to that person, right? And that one person, they've only done financial planning once, right? So they might get it right, they might get it wrong, but they don't have the benefit of learning from all the mistakes of all the people that came before them. It's the exact same thing for us. You're going to apply to school once, ideally, right? That's the ideal
That's the goal. Yeah.
situation. Yeah. And you can do it alone and like hope for the best, or you can benefit from all the learnings and all the mistakes that our students have made before, and then we have it crafted into a nice curriculum, and we just take you step by step through it, and that way you at least know that like what you're doing has been done before.
Amazing. Jason, this has been an awesome resource for people that are looking to add another tool to their tool belt to help their kids graduate debt free, and for people who are kind of worried about prioritizing between paying for their kids' school and retirement and all that kind of stuff. Here's another resource where you can focus some of your time and effort to help your kids graduate debt free. Thanks so much for taking the time and joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.